on a Sunday like this, we need props. So about 10 years ago or so, I think it was at a church yard sale, there was this thing that I'm going to show you in a second for sale, and Dan just had to have it. This is the Jesus Saves Bank. I think he actually paid $5 for it. And it is a PlasticJesus. He is leaning on a rock, and he has a slit between his arms where you can put money in. Jesus saves. On the side of the box, it says, "He who gathers money little by little makes it grow." Proverbs 13, verse 11. So, someone will buy it from me? $100. The money goes to the church. So, you notice that my sermon title is PlasticJesus. It's not because of that. It's because there's actually a website called PlasticJesus, and most of the liturgy for today and much of my information for today comes from that website, PlasticJesus. You can look it up. It's a collaboration of a variety of denominations. I know the Presbyterians, the UCC, the Methodists, the Episcopalians all have given input and shared examples of how they're dealing with the plastics crisis. So invite you to visit that. I happen to be putting Christmas decorations away in January and saw this and thought, I wonder why we still have that, and now I'm glad we do. But this is a serious topic, and it doesn't feel very theological. So I hope that I can set the stage and then lead you into both the story that Eric read for us and one other story that I think informs our circumstances. But you can read almost any psalm, right? And there's some reference to the beauty of creation or the God of creation. Clearly, the ancients were more connected to the land and to creation than we are today. It's a malady of the modern era, but it doesn't have to be, right? So on the front page of the website, PlasticJesus, you'll read this. Created in 1907, synthetic plastic began being produced on a global scale in the 1950s. Over the next 70 years, annual production of plastics increased nearly 230-fold to 46 million tons in 2019. Single-use plastics have become one of the most urgent environmental threats. These are too often buried in landfills or dumped untreated in our water sources. Even the manufacturing process itself has been identified as a major source of climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And we might say, well, that doesn't affect the church. Let's talk about Easter eggs. One example. Blair Industries was once the only American manufacturer of plastic Easter eggs. At its height in the early 2000s, it was making 250 million Easter eggs a year. It has since gone bankrupt because it could not compete with cheaper Easter eggs coming out of China. One vivid example of the health costs of our addiction to plastics can be found in the industrial corridor along the lower Mississippi River, a region known to environmental justice organizations as cancer alley. The 130-mile stretch along the river is home to more than 200 industrial facilities, including oil refineries, plastic plants, chemical plants, and other factories that emit significant amounts of harmful air pollution. The situation has heightened the reality that many of the petrochemical plants that contribute to the insatiable demand for products derived from crude oil or fossil gas are concentrated overwhelmingly in close proximity to poor and Black communities. People who live close to these production facilities experience severe health consequences, including cancer, organ malfunction, impaired sensory organs like eyes and skin, birth defects, and much more. Some studies estimate that the total mass of microplastics consumed by adults corresponds to, any guesses, how many plastic bags a year do we consume, the average American, in microplastics? You're not even close. 50 plastic bags a year. Start eating. Or 1 credit card per week. That's what we are ingesting as adults in America. Cigarette butts whose filters contain tiny plastic fibers, food wrappers, plastic bottles, plastic bottle caps, plastic grocery bags, plastic straws, plastic stirrers are among the most common pollutants. These plastics can take, as you know, anywhere from 20 to 50 to 500 years to decompose, depending on the material structure and environmental factors such as sunlight exposure. Less than 14% of plastic packaging is recycled. And with plastics being composed of several different polymer types, it's nearly impossible to recycle different plastics together, thus the little marking on the bottom so you know what kind of plastic it is. They're impossible to recycle together because they melt at different temperatures. Additionally, to be recycled properly, plastics need to be separated, which is not only time-consuming but costly. Our Creation Justice folks went to the recycling plant in Holland, and they said, throw all the plastic in, right? Yes. So don't worry about the little thing on the bottom. Just recycle all of it. They'll discern, decipher, take care of. So not an excuse to not recycle. While our plastic situation seems overwhelming, okay, we need to lighten up for just a minute. Breaking news. Plastic knives are banished. They simply aren't cutting it anymore. I didn't make it up. One more, right? A plastic bucket versus a metal bucket pales in comparison. I Googled plastic jokes, and the majority of them were about plastic surgeons. So how do we think about this theologically, and does our ancient text have anything to say about this? It does. So first of all, we need to think communally. The overuse of plastics harms vulnerable communities at a higher rate than others. Our concern for the environment, the more than human community and ecosystems, have to be included in that understanding of community. Lack of intent does not equal lack of harm. That we don't intend to pollute fragile ecosystems and neighborhoods does not absolve us from culpability in the damage that our oversized demand for plastics creates. What if part of the problem is actually the dislocation of the wealthier from more impoverished people, so that we have no sense of the impacts of our behaviors on our neighbors? I have to read about it on a website called PlasticJesus. There's a story in the New Testament that Eric didn't read for us. You might remember it. We often hear about it at Lent. It's about Jesus going into the temple, and he sees all the sellers at the tables as the people are walking in, selling their wares, and he's so angry. They've turned his father's temple into a den of thieves, he says, and he overturns the tables. Part of the problem was that they were selling in the temple. But the bigger issue was that the interest they were charging people on what they were selling affected the poor people more than the wealthier people. It's kind of like, some people couldn't bring their sacrifices from home, or maybe they didn't have a sacrifice, but to get in after this long pilgrimage, they had to buy one. It's kind of like, right, if you buy a ticket for a concert online versus a ticket at the door, often you're paying a lot more at the door, right? Well, there are those fees and charges and whatnot. Forget that example. So the implication is that, and there are bans in the Old Testament against charging interest on loans, for instance, because they affect the poor more than they affect the wealthy. The Exodus 20 text, which Eric read, is part of what we call the Ten Commandments. And one of them is to worship no other gods before the true God, to owe your allegiance to the God of love. The call is to put true love, unselfish, unconditional love, above all other love. And to love is to be in relationship. So the ongoing practice of loving is to understand and remember that we are connected to everything. Ourself, others, other humans, the other than human world, and the holy. We are never an entity unto ourselves. To put culture, stuff, economics, what I like to call bigger, better, much more, new, next, first is to undermine our connections, to sacrifice what it truly means to be human. Farmer and poet Wendell Berry takes up this theological cause. He writes about replacing God with gods, a lowercase g, what we call idolatry. He says, idolatry always reduces to worship of something made with hands, something confined within the terms of human work and human comprehension. Unquote. It's easy to see that part of what drives our plastic crisis is the idolatrous desire for stuff. From gadgets to furnishings to transportation, we have made acquiring consumer goods an obsession of our culture. This market-driven compulsion has led to dissatisfaction with anything other than bigger, better, much more, new, and next. Planned obsolescence is taken for granted as the cost of doing business. Berry continues, the problem of our dissatisfaction with all the things that we use is not correctable within the terms of the economy that produces these things. In other words, we'll not find contentment within the bounds of an economy that consistently tells us to buy bigger, better, much more, new, and next. Metanoia, the Greek word that we translate as repentance, means to change direction. It means to turn around. The directional change that we need in the case of plastics is both personal and economic. We need to move from consumption to connections with people, creation, and God in our own lives, in our economy, and we need to stop putting profits over people and planet. So you did hear the story of the Tower of Babel. A really profound writer on this story is the Jewish scholar, should have written her name down. I'll think of it. Thank you, Amy Jill Levine. She writes about this story, and she talks about it being a agricultural phenomenon where people could grow so much more that herds got bigger, and so they needed more room, so they moved out beyond the city. And then city people, because bricks were the new technology, city people began to build up instead of out. And so you have this story with this image of this idolatrous tower going up to the heavens, like the people could reach God with their technology. And of course, the Jewish tradition, they would say, God doesn't want that. They knew what God wanted. They said, the cultures are becoming one. The people are disconnected from the land. We need to do something different. And indeed, it became too expensive pretty soon to move the crops and what was coming from the flocks into the city. So only the very wealthy could afford to stay in the tower. And pretty soon, their language got confused because some were saying, we got to stay, bring us more stuff. And others were saying, no, we got to go, this isn't right. And you can see what happened. They dispersed. They may have been all speaking Hebrew, but they weren't speaking the same language. Do you ever have that feeling in our culture today? We're not speaking the same language. So what must we do? What tables must we overturn? What kind of scene do we need to make in order to demonstrate that we care about our relationship with the planet? Are we willing to be called crazy for putting in a water bottle filling station in our friendship hall? Thank you, Creation Justice Team. Are we willing to be laughed at for our ban of single-use plastics? What can we do? Well, the website that's below the title of my reflection, PlasticJesus, sends you to another website called Beyond Plastics. In it, there's a month-long calendar for things that you can do. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you what you're doing, so think about what you're doing. Here's a couple things. Bring your own mug or glass when you're going to order a drink. I know some restaurants won't take it, but try it. Bring your own reusable container for leftovers at a restaurant. Bring your own water bottle and get ready to fill it at the filling station. Check your bank to see if it invests in fossil fuels. Switch your plastic barrier under your garden from plastic to burlap. There are other options there, paper or cardboard. Switch from single tea bags. Did you know that tea bags contain microplastics? switch your tea consumption to bulk? What are you doing? What are you doing to address plastics in your life? Chris?
Tennis balls in the dryer instead of dryer sheets.
Tennis balls in the dryer instead of dryer sheets. They contain plastics. Paul? Check to see if it's recyclable before you buy it. Not paper or reusable bags at the grocery store. Buy things in glass whenever you can instead of plastic. Say it once more.
Replace all Tupperware with glass.
Replace Tupperware and plastic stuff, reusable containers. Yeah, with glass containers. You know what's really inexpensive and works really well is glass jars. And they fit nicely in the fridge next to each other. There are other suggestions on this website. I invite you to go take a look and do what you can. One last thing I'll mention is to watch a documentary by PBS called Plastic Wars. It's very informative. We are people who care about the planet, and sometimes we need to know before we can do. But when we know better, we have to do better. So blessings on us as we journey into no single-use plastics, and blessings on you as you make this journey in your own life.